Some stories begin with a whisper, others with a storm. This one started with a single, cruel moment-to-moment that would reveal the true character of everyone involved and change lives forever. It was a bright Saturday morning in the bustling city of Brookside. The sun shone through the windows of the elegant Blue Willow Cafe, where the scent of fresh pastries and coffee filled the air. The cafe was a favorite among the city's elite, a place where business deals were made and secrets were whispered over lattes. At a corner table, a young waitress named Emily moved quickly between customers, her brown hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She wore a faded apron and a tired smile, but her eyes sparkled with warmth. Emily was known for her gentle nature and her unwavering kindness, even on the busiest days. But Emily's life was far from easy. She worked double shifts to pay for her mother's medical bills and to care for her beloved German Shepherd puppy, Max. Max was her world, a loyal companion who had been with her through every hardship. She often brought him to the cafe, where he waited patiently in the small staff yard, his big ears perked and his tail wagging whenever she came outside. That morning, the cafe was especially crowded. Among the guests was a wealthy couple, the Harrisons, known for their sharp suits, expensive jewelry, and sharper tongues. They were regulars, but not for their kindness. The staff dreaded their visits, for the Harrisons treated everyone as if they were beneath them. As Emily served their table, she overheard Mrs. Harrison complaining about the filthy dog she'd seen outside. "It's disgusting," she sneered. "Why would anyone bring an animal like that near a place like this?" Emily's cheeks flushed, but she said nothing. She finished her shift, then slipped outside to check on Max. She found him curled up in the shade, his eyes bright with love. She knelt beside him, whispering, "You're a good boy, Max. Don't listen to them." What Emily didn't know was that the Harrisons had followed her. As she stood to return inside, Mr. Harrison blocked her path. "You think you can bring that mutt here and ruin our meal? Eh? Spot." Emily stood her ground, her voice trembling but firm. "He's not hurting anyone. He's just waiting for me." Mrs. Harrison scoffed. "You people are all the same. No respect for others. Maybe you need to learn your place." Before Emily could react, Mr. Harrison shoved her aside, his foot lashing out at Max. The puppy yelped, scrambling back in fear. Emily rushed to shield him, her arms wrapped protectively around his trembling body. The Harrisons turned to leave, satisfied with their cruelty. But what they didn't know was that someone had been watching a man sitting quietly at a nearby table, his eyes sharp and his posture calm. His name was Jake Carter, and he was a Navy SEAL on leave, home for the first time in years. Jake had seen enough. He stood, his presence commanding, and walked toward the scene that would soon become the talk of the entire city. But as he approached, the Harrisons shot him a look of pure disdain, as if daring him to intervene. Jake's gaze was steady. His jaw set. He didn't need to raise his voice or make a scene. His very presence was enough to make most men think twice. Emily, still on her knees, beside Max, looked up at Jake, her eyes wide with fear and humiliation. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Max whimpered, pressing closer to her, his body trembling. Jake knelt beside them, his voice gentle but firm. "Are you both all right?" Emily nodded, blinking back tears. "I'm fine. Max is just scared. He didn't do anything wrong." Jake's eyes softened as he looked at the puppy, then back at Emily. "No, he didn't. And neither did you." Inside the cafe, the staff and customers watched in stunned silence. Some looked away, afraid to get involved. Others whispered behind their hands, their eyes darting between the Harrisons and Jake. The Harrisons, sensing the shift in the room, straightened their shoulders and strode back inside, their heads held high. But the damage was done. The story of what had happened would spread, and the lines between right and wrong had been drawn. Jake helped Emily to her feet, his hand steady and reassuring. "Don't let him get to you," he said quietly. "People like that, they only have the power you give them." Emily managed a small smile, grateful for his kindness. "Thank you." Jake nodded, his eyes lingering on Max. "He's a good dog. You're lucky to have each other." As Emily led Max back to the staff yard, Jake watched the Harrisons return to their table, their faces flushed with anger and embarrassment. He knew this wasn't over. People like the Harrisons, didn't back down easily. But neither did he. And so, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, and the cafe buzzed with nervous energy, a quiet battle had begun, one that would test the strength of kindness, the power of community, and the courage of a young woman and her loyal dog. What no one knew was that this battle would soon become a war, and that the outcome would change not just Emily's life, but the lives of everyone in Brookside. The hours after the incident passed in a complete blur for Emily. She tried to focus on her work, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking as she poured coffee and cleared tables. Over in their usual corner, the Harrisons sat as if nothing had happened at all, but their eyes, cold and calculating, followed her every single move. The other staff shot her sympathetic looks, but nobody dared to speak up. In a place where tips could mean the difference between buying groceries and going hungry, silence was the safest bet. Emily's mind was racing. What if the Harrisons complained to Mr. Patel, the cafe's owner? What if she lost her job? She couldn't afford to be out of work, not with her mother's medication to buy and Max's food. She glanced out the window at the staff yard. Max was there, curled up with his head on his paws, watching her with those loyal eyes. The sight gave her a tiny bit of comfort, but it didn't last long. During the lunch rush, Mrs. Harrison snapped her fingers to call Emily over. "You?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "I want to speak to your manager." Emily's heart sank right to the floor. Forcing a polite smile, she nodded. "Of course, ma'am. I'll get him right away." She found Mr. Patel in the kitchen, anxiously checking inventory. "Mr. Patel, the Harrisons want to speak with you," he sighed, wiping his brow. "What is it now?" Emily led him to their table, her stomach in knots. Mrs. Harrison didn't waste a second. "This girl is a disgrace," she began, her voice loud enough for half the cafe to hear. "She brings that filthy animal here, disrupts our meal, and then has the nerve to talk back. If you want to keep our business, you'll do something about it." Mr. Patel's face went pale. He glanced at Emily, then at the Harrisons. "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Harrison. I'll speak to her." Mrs. Harrison leaned back, satisfied. "See that you do." Emily's cheeks burned with humiliation as Mr. Patel pulled her aside. "Emily, please. Just keep the dog out of sight, and try not to upset them. We can't afford to lose their business." Emily just nodded, biting back tears. "Yes, sir." As she went back to work, she caught Jake's eye. He was at a table near the window, and he'd seen everything. There was a quiet strength in his gaze, a promise that he hadn't forgotten what he saw. After her shift, Emily went to the staff yard to get Max. She knelt beside him, burying her face in his soft fur. "I'm so sorry, Max. I wish things were different." He just licked her cheek, his tail thumping softly against the ground. In that moment, a wave of determination washed over her. She wouldn't let the Harrisons, or anyone else, take away the little bit of happiness she had left. That night, walking home, Emily thought about her life. She remembered finding Max in an alley, shivering and alone. She'd taken him in without a second thought. He had repaid her with unconditional love, never judging, never leaving her side. Her mother, once so full of life, was now mostly confined to bed, her illness draining her strength. Emily worked every hour she could, just scraping by. Meanwhile, in a penthouse across town, the Harrisons laughed about the day. "Did you see the look on her face?" Mrs. Harrison cackled. Mr. Harrison smirked. "People like her are a dime a dozen. If she loses her job, she'll learn her place." But Jake Carter, the Navy SEAL, was replaying the scene in his own mind. He'd seen injustice before, but something about Emily's quiet courage struck a chord. He'd come home to find peace, but he was starting to realize that peace wasn't just the absence of conflict. It was the presence of justice. The next morning, Jake returned to the cafe. He waited until it was quiet, then walked over to Emily. "Hey," he said softly. "How are you holding up?" Emily shrugged. "I'm okay. Just tired." Jake shook his head. "I saw what happened. You didn't deserve that? People like the Harrisons think they can do whatever they want because no one stands up to them. But you did. That takes guts." Emily managed a small, genuine smile. "Thank you. I just wish it made a difference. Jake leaned in, his voice low. It does. More than you know. As he left, he made a silent vow. He wouldn't let her fight this battle alone. But the Harrisons weren't finished. That afternoon, they came bike, their eyes cold and hard. Emily served them with quiet dignity, refusing to let them see her fear. But as she turned to leave, Mrs. Harrison stuck out her foot, tripping her. Emily stumbled, catching herself just in time. The cafe fell silent. Mrs. Harrison smirked, clumsy, as well as stupid. I see. Emily straightened up, her cheeks burning. She glanced over and saw Jake stand up, his face unreadable. The battle lines had been drawn. And this time, Emily wasn't alone. The tension in the blue willow calf was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Emily's hands trembled as she tried to compose herself, refusing to give the Harrisons the satisfaction of seeing her cry. The other customers watched in an uncomfortable silence. Some looked away, while others glanced at Jake, maybe hoping he would do something. The staff just exchanged worried looks, but nobody dared to step in. Everyone knew about the Harrisons' money and influence. Fear has a way of silencing even the kindest people, but Jake Carter wasn't afraid. He'd stared down warlords and terrorists, survived ambushes and firefights. He knew that the biggest battles aren't always fought with weapons, but with words and courage. He stepped forward, his voice calm but clear enough to carry through the cafe. Excuse me, is there a problem here? Mrs. Harrison turned, her lips curling into a sneer. This doesn't concern you. Jake's gaze was steady. It does if you're harassing someone who is just trying to do her job. Mr. Harrison bristled. Who do you think you are? Jake didn't flinch. Someone who believes in respect, and I saw what you did yesterday. Kicking a puppy and shoving a waitress isn't just rude, it's cruel. A hush fell over the entire cafe. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, slowly, a few customers started nodding in agreement. An elderly man at the counter muttered, "He's right." Mrs. Harrison's eyes flashed with anger. You have no idea who we are. We could ruin you. Jake offered a smile, but it held no warmth. You're welcome to try, but I think you'll find the world is watching now. He turned to the other customers, raising his voice just enough for everyone to hear. This cafe is a place for everyone. No one should be afraid to bring their dog, or to stand up for what's right. If you agree, let Emily and Max know they're welcome here. Silence. Then, one by one, customers began to clap. Some stood up. Others called out words of support. We love you, Emily. Max is the best dog. Don't let them scare you. The Harrisons looked around, their confidence finally crumbling. For the first time, they realized they were outnumbered. Mr. Patel, the manager, stepped forward, his voice a little shaky, but firm. Emily, I'm so sorry for what happened. You and Max are always welcome here. And if anyone has a problem with that, they can take their business elsewhere. The Harrisons stood there, furious. You'll regret this, Mrs. Harrison hissed. But as they stormed out, the cafe erupted in cheers. Emily hugged Max, tears of relief streaming down her face. Jake smiled, his heart full. For the first time, Emily felt truly seen. She realized that kindness and courage really could change things and that she was never as alone as she thought. But the Harrisons weren't the type to accept defeat quietly. That evening, as the cafe closed and Emily walked home with Max, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see their sleek black car following her. But the street was empty. At home, she tried to relax, but her mind was racing. What if the Harrisons made good on their threats? What if Mr. Patel changed his mind? She looked down at Max, who lay at her feet, his eyes full of trust. We'll be okay, boy, she whispered, mostly to herself. Meanwhile, in their penthouse apartment, the Harrisons were plotting their revenge. No one embarrasses us like that, Mr. Harrison growled. Mrs. Harrison's eyes were cold. Let's see how she likes it when she's out of a job. The next morning, Emily arrived at the cafe to find Mr. Patel waiting, his face drawn and anxious. Emily, can I speak with you? Her heart sank. Of course. He led her to his office and closed the door. I got a call last night. The Harrisons are threatening to sue. They say you assaulted them, that your dog is dangerous. They're demanding I fire you, or they'll ruin us. Emily's hands shook, but that's not true. You saw what happened, Mr. Patel sighed, looking away in shame. I know. But they have money. Lawyers, I can't afford a lawsuit. I'm so sorry, Emily. Tears welled in her eyes. Please, Mr. Patel. I need this job. My mom, he just shook his head. I'm sorry. I'll give you a good reference. That's all I can do. Emily left the cafe in a daze, Max trotting beside her. It felt like the ground had just dropped out from under her. She had stood up for what was right, and now she was being punished for it. Jake found her sitting on a park bench, her face buried in Max's fur. He sat beside her, quiet for a moment. I heard what happened. Emily just nodded, unable to speak. Jake's voice was gentle but firm. This isn't over. People like the Harrisons win because they scare everyone into silence. But you're not alone, Emily. I'm with you, and I promise we're going to fight this. Emily looked at him, a flicker of hope in her eyes. But how? They have everything. I have nothing. Jake smiled. You have more than you think. You have courage. You have friends. And you have the truth. Sometimes, that's all it takes. As the sun set over the city, Emily felt a new resolve growing inside her. She wouldn't give up, not for herself, not for Max, and not for anyone who had ever been made to feel small. The battle was far from over. But for the first time, Emily believed she might just win. Losing her job at the Blue Willow Cafe was one of the hardest things Emily had ever gone through. It felt like she'd lost a part of herself. The cafe wasn't just a job. It was her second home, a place where she found purpose and friendship. Now, she found herself walking the city streets, resume in hand, with her loyal dog, Max, by her side, searching for any work she could find. But door after door closed on her. It seemed the Harrisons' influence was everywhere. One manager glanced at her application and just shook his head, saying, "Sorry, not hiring." At another cafe, a barista leaned in and whispered, "Aren't you the girl who got fired for attacking customers?" The rumors, cruel and twisted, had spread like wildfire, far faster than the truth. Emily's savings quickly disappeared. She started skipping meals to make sure her mother had enough to eat and began rationing Max's food. One by one, she pawned the few valuable things she owned to pay for her mother's essential medicine. Every night was a struggle. She would lie awake, listening to her mother's strained breathing and Max's soft whimpers, wondering how much longer she could possibly hold on. Max seemed to understand her despair. He never left her side, always pressing his warm body against her when she cried, gently licking away her tears. He was her rock, her only source of comfort in a world that felt cold and heartless. While Emily struggled, the Harrisons were living it up. They celebrated their so-called victory, dining at the city's most exclusive restaurants, laughing as they told the story of the uppity waitress who was finally put in her place. They bragged to their friends about their power and their ability to ruin anyone who dared to cross them. But not everyone was fooled by their act. Jake Carter, the veteran from the cafe, was watching from the sidelines. He was quietly gathering information, building a case, and rallying support. He talked to other cafe owners, to customers who had seen what really happened, to anyone who would listen. He soon discovered a disturbing pattern. The Harrisons had a long history of bullying and intimidation. Waitstaff fired for no reason. Small businesses forced to close after refusing to give in to their demands. Jake's anger grew, but he knew he had to be smart. This wasn't a battle he could win with force. He needed a solid plan to expose the Harrisons for who they really were and show the city that kindness and courage could still win against cruelty and greed. One evening, Jake found Emily in the park with Max. She was staring into the distance, her eyes looking hollow and exhausted. He sat beside her and, after a moment of silence, spoke softly. "I know you're tired. I know you feel like you're all alone in this. But you're not. I've been talking to people who want to help. You're not the only one the Harrisons have hurt." Emily just shook her head. "What's the point? They have all the money, the best lawyers, All the connections. I'm just nobody. Jake's voice was gentle but firm. You are not nobody. You're the reason people are finally finding the courage to speak up. You stood up to them when no one else would. That takes incredible strength. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. I'm just so tired. Jake, I don't know how much more I can take. Jake reached into his pocket and handed her a small envelope. Open it, he said. Inside was a letter of recommendation, signed by Mr. Patel, the owner of the Blue Willow. I know he had to let you go, Jake explained, but he wanted you to have this. He's sorry, and he's willing to testify about what really happened if it comes to that. Emily's hands trembled as she read the letter. For the first time in what felt like forever, a tiny flicker of hope ignited in her heart. Jake continued, I've also found a lawyer, someone willing to take your case pro bono. And there are others, too. People who want to help. You're not alone in this anymore, Emily. But just as hope began to creep back in, disaster struck. One night, returning from yet another disappointing job interview, Emily found her apartment door slightly ajar. Her heart pounded in her chest as she rushed inside, calling for her mother. Her mom was safe, but the apartment had been completely ransacked. Drawers were pulled out, their belongings thrown everywhere, and Max was gone. Panic seized her. She searched the entire building, desperately calling his name, but he was nowhere to be found. Shaking! She called Jake. Max is gone, she cried. Someone took him. Jake immediately sprang into action. He contacted the police, started canvassing the neighborhood, and rallied friends to help search. The hours dragged on with no word. Emily was inconsolable, her grief raw and overwhelming. The next morning, a note was slipped under her door. It was typed with no signature, but the message was chillingly clear. Leave town, or you'll never see your dog again. Emily collapsed, sobbing. The Harrisons had gone too far. They had taken the one thing she loved most in the world. Jake found her there, a broken and defeated heap on the floor. He knelt beside her, his voice fierce with determination. We are going to get Max back, I promise you. And we are going to make the Harrisons pay for everything they've done. Emily looked up at him, her eyes a mix of despair and a sliver of hope. She whispered. Jake's jaw tightened. It's time they learned what happens when you push good people too far. He then revealed his plan. They would gather every witness, every victim, every single piece of evidence against the Harrisons. They would go public and tell the world the truth. He would use his own story, his military service, and his honor to rally the community and expose the couple's crimes for everyone to see. Emily nodded, her resolve hardening into steel. She would fight, not just for herself, but for Max, for her mother, and for every single person who had been silenced by fear. The battle was about to reach its climax, and Team Emily, was not alone. The city of Brookside had never seen a storm like this. The story of Emily's firing spread like wildfire, first in hushed tones in cafes, then exploding across social media, and finally hitting the local news headlines. Waitress fired after protecting puppy from wealthy couple-s attack. The community was in an uproar, rallying behind Emily, their local hero. The Harrisons, once untouchable, found themselves in the middle of a massive scandal. Jake, the quiet Navy SEAL, became a force of nature behind the scenes. He worked relentlessly, collecting statements from former employees and others who had suffered under the Harrisons' reign of terror. He and the lawyer built a powerful case for wrongful termination, harassment, and animal cruelty. Even Mr. Patel, the cafe owner, riddled with guilt, agreed to testify alongside other staff who witnessed the incident. But one crucial piece was still missing. Max Emily's life became a whirlwind of interviews, legal meetings, and a desperate, frantic search. She plastered the city with flyers, called every single animal shelter, and walked the streets for hours, her voice hoarse from calling Max's name. Every night, she'd collapse in her apartment, exhausted, a little piece of her hope chipped away. But Jake wouldn't let her despair. We're close, Emily, he'd tell her, his voice firm. The Harrisons are feeling the pressure. They're getting sloppy. Then, one evening, as Emily sat in her dark, silent apartment, her phone buzzed with an anonymous tip. Check the old warehouse on 5th and Main. Bring help. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Jake and Emily, along with the lawyer and 2 police officers who had taken a personal interest in the case, raced to the location. The warehouse was a dark, derelict shell, its windows boarded up like blind eyes. As they moved through the oppressive silence, calling for Max, a faint, weak whimper echoed from the shadows. Emily ran towards the sound, her heart in her throat. There, locked in a small, filthy cage, was Max. He was scared and dirty, but he was alive. She dropped to her knees, sobbing with overwhelming relief as Max licked the tears from her face, his tail giving a weak but determined wag. The police documented everything, taking photos and collecting evidence. The scene quickly filled with more officers, and they found more than just Max. They uncovered records tying the Harrisons to a web of illegal activities, from threats and bribery to a disturbing history of animal abuse. The next morning, a new headline dominated the city. Wealthy couple arrested in animal cruelty and harassment case. The Harrisons were taken into custody, their downfall broadcast for all to see. Their empire crumbled as allies and business partners abandoned them. Emily, with Max safely back in her arms, became a symbol of resilience for the entire city. The community showered her with support, raising funds for her mother's medical care and offering her a new job at a local animal rescue center. The cafe, once a place of fear, was transformed into a beacon of kindness. Jake stood by Emily through it all, his quiet strength, her constant anchor. He even spoke at community meetings, sharing his own story and inspiring others to stand up for what's right. The day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Emily testified, her voice clear and steady. She spoke of the fear she had endured, but also of the incredible courage and kindness that had saved her. Jake's testimony followed, his words carrying the weight of a man who has seen the worst of humanity but still chooses to believe in the best. The verdict was swift. The Harrisons were found guilty on all major counts. As the judge read their sentence, community service, heavy fines, and public apologies, Emily felt a profound sense of relief wash over her. She looked at Jake, at Max, at the community that had become her family, and knew she wasn't alone anymore. Brookside was a changed city. Laughter filled the cafe, and Emily's mother's health began to improve. Max, the once frightened puppy, became a certified therapy dog, bringing joy to hospitals and schools. Jake continued his service, a protector for anyone in need. He and Emily remained inseparable, their bond forged in the crucible of that crisis. The story became a local legend, a powerful reminder that kindness and courage can truly change the world. Emily knew the fight for justice was never really over, but now she had the strength to stand tall and speak out. Walking through the city, with Max by her side and Jake at her shoulder, she knew that together they were ready for anything. The months that followed brought a gentle transformation to Brookside, one that could be felt in the smallest of ways. The Blue Willow Cafe, once a place shadowed by fear and intimidation, now buzzed with laughter and warmth. The staff, who used to be wary and silent, finally found their voices. They shared stories, supported one another, and looked out for every customer, especially those who needed a little extra kindness. Emily flourished in her new role at the Animal Rescue Center. She poured her heart into caring for abandoned dogs, using her own experiences to comfort frightened animals and anxious adopters. Max, who is now a local celebrity, greeted every visitor with a wagging tail and gentle eyes. Children who had once been afraid of dogs now lined up just to pet him, their laughter echoing through the halls. The cafe, under new management, became a symbol of hope and second chances. Mr. Patel, after testifying against the Harrisons, was offered a job at a new restaurant where he vowed to create a workplace built on respect and compassion. The staff who had once feared for their jobs now thrived, their confidence growing with every passing day. And what about Jake Carter, the Navy SEAL whose quiet courage started this whole movement? He found a new sense of purpose right here in Brookside. He volunteered at the Animal Rescue Center, taught self-defense classes to women and teens, and mentored young veterans struggling to adjust to civilian life. His bond with Emily deepened, built on mutual respect and a shared commitment to justice. As for the Harrisons, stripped of their power and influence, they just faded from the public eye. Their former friends and business partners distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with their cruelty. The couple's public apology on local television was met with a mix of satisfaction and forgiveness. Some in the community chose to let go of their anger, believing that true change was possible. Others, still healing from old wounds, simply moved on. But the greatest change was in Emily herself. She stood taller, spoke with confidence, and faced each day with a renewed sense of hope. She no longer saw herself as a victim, but as a survivor, a woman who had faced injustice and refused to back down. Her mother's health improved, supported by neighbors and friends. Their small apartment, once filled with worry, now overflowed with laughter and love. Max, ever loyal, remained by Emily's side through it all. He became a therapy dog, visiting hospitals and nursing homes, bringing comfort to those in need. His story, once one of fear and abandonment, became a beacon of hope for others. People from all over wrote letters, sent donations, and shared their own stories of courage and resilience. The city of Brookside, inspired by Emily's journey, launched a campaign to promote kindness and schools held assemblies on bullying and compassion. Local businesses pledged to treat their employees with dignity and respect. The mayor even declared an annual Kindness Day, encouraging residents to perform acts of generosity, big and small. Emily's story was featured in newspapers and on television, but she remained humble, always crediting Max, Jake, and the community for their support. She spoke at schools and community events, urging others to stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. Her message was simple but powerful. You are never alone. There is always someone who cares, and together, we can make the world a better place. Jake, too, found healing in the community he had helped to protect. He continued his work with veterans, started a support group for those struggling with PTSD, and became a beloved figure in Brookside. As the seasons changed and the city moved forward, the memory of the Harrisons' cruelty faded, replaced by stories of hope and redemption. But above all, there was gratitude for second chances, for the courage to speak out, and for the love that had carried them through the darkest times. As the sun set over Brookside, Emily stood on the cafe's porch, Max at her side and Jake's arm around her shoulders. She looked out at the faces of friends and neighbors, at the children playing in the street, at the city that had become her home. She knew that life would never be perfect. There would always be challenges, always be those who tried to tear others down, but she also knew that kindness was stronger than cruelty. That hope was more powerful than fear. And taught love given freely, and without condition could change the world. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And remember, true strength isn't measured by power or wealth, but by the courage to stand up for what's right even when no one else will. Because sometimes, the bravest heroes are the ones who simply refuse to look away. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is a single act of kindness.